Okay, hello guys, and welcome to this week's episode. I'm sorry, I know I'm a couple of days late. I have been making some technical adjustments to my equipment. I hope you can see the video quality is slightly better now. So what I've decided to do this week, I'm just going to combine the seeds and the stars. So we're gonna have SIDs and the stars configured in today's video. So we'll be taking off from JKIA to Mombasa, HKMO. So we've been given our SID and our star by ATC. Our AI ATC, I'm not using VATSIM this time. I'm just using the normal AI ATC. So that way I get to pick which SID to use strictly or simply for demo purposes. So we are going to be using the ATUD1D. Yeah, that is the ATUD1D ATUD SID out of JKIA, and we'll be using the NERE2A NERE2A approach into runway 21 via EGVOM transition for our star. So here goes. Okay, so I'm just going to go through the standard procedure of firing up the plane. We discussed this in the last video, so I'm not going to go into detail of that. So let's just get the plane started and configured for the SIDs. So I'll also set up the payloads real quick, then we can start looking at the SIDs. Right, so now we are setting the route. So we'll be going direct to Uvova waypoint. Then from Uvova we'll take the UQ135 airway to NERE2A. Sorry, I make a slight mistake there. So we'll just get rid of that. Right, so let's just see this. Yeah, once we have that set up, now we can begin inputting our SIDs and our stars. So here goes. Okay, so we click on the departure arrivals button. So we are going to select our ATUD1D to Uvova from runway 6, as you can see there, and we execute that. Then we set our arrival. We're arriving on to the NERE2A via the EGVOM transition. We're gonna select RNAV EGVOM. We'll be using the RNAV for approach. So we'll be getting onto the EGVOM transition. So we execute that. We select EGVOM and execute. So that sets up a star for EGVOM when we're approaching the Mombasa airport. So then from there we go and set our performance details. We put in our zero fuel weight. I usually use Tomcat to do this to help me do these calculations. There are various other tools you can use out there. I like to use Tomcat. You can also use SimBrief. Sometimes I use SimBrief, sometimes I use Tomcat. So it just depends on what your preference is. Especially when I'm planning routes that I'm going to use on VATSIM, then I tend to prefer to use SimBrief, because most of the times when I file a flight plan from SimBrief, it's approved, and if I try and do it from anywhere else, it gets rejected or corrected. So yeah, since we're not using the VATSIM, I'm just going to use Tomcat. So our zero fuel index there, you can see, is 123.2. Our reserve fuel will be roughly 4.1 tons. We'll be using a cost index of 30. We'll be flying at cruising altitude of 26,000 feet. I usually don't like to put it too high in Mombasa because this Boeing is pretty fast, so by the time you get to your top of climb, you're already on your top of descent. So I usually like to keep it simple. We're gonna use derated takeoff. So just gonna set those settings for derated takeoff. So we're going to use a 24% derated takeoff. Derated takeoffs are good for, very important for the longevity of your engines. You don't want to always take off with full power. In the long run, it wears out the engines. So using a derated takeoff just gives you the power you need. In the long run, it's good for the longevity of the engines of the plane. So we're gonna take off with flaps 10. Gives us a V1, VR, and V2 right there. So this is for the takeoff performance. Then we'll go ahead and set the approach. Sorry, I tried to do some configurations there, trying to put in the slope. I get kind of mixed up. Clearly that's not acceptable. So we're just gonna ignore that and just go to set our takeoff our approach performance. Okay, so for our approach, we'll be landing with flaps 40. VREF is 132. I usually put there the VREF speed, although I think you're supposed to put the approach speed, but I put the VREF speed just so that I can come in a little bit slower and get a smoother landing, or what you call a butter landing. So the slower you are, the better chances of getting a smooth landing. So I'm now done configuring the seats and the stars. That really marks up today's session on how to configure the seats and the stars on the Boeing's 737 PMDG Boeing 737 FMS. I tend to find the Boeing FMS or FMC much more easier to use than the Dash 8s, simply because it's It's more dynamic, it's got more features, and it's pretty straightforward. It's not very confusing like the Dash 8. So now just proceeding with the rest of the startup configuration, then we'll push back and then we'll take off. We do the oxygen check. This was all covered in last week's video, so I won't go into much detail, but I'll just talk about what I'm doing. So there we do. Now we're on the eFace panel, so I'm setting the indicated airspeed heading. We'll just leave it at the runway heading, then we'll switch to LNAV. I'll keep it fairly steep, the ascent, because we're not going very fast, so we don't have much time to climb slowly. So that's the lights test. From there we set the yaw damper. Turn on the window heat. Turn on the hydraulics. So we'll set our cruising altitude and landing altitude. Like I said in the last video, get this wrong and you kill everyone on the plane. So that's very important. That's a very, very important setting there. 26,000 feet, 200 feet is our airport altitude in Mombasa.
And ground cockpit.
Go ahead, Captain.
We're all set to go up here. We've been cleared to push and start at your discretion.
Roger that, ready for push. Power and air are clear, doors closed. We are ready for pushback. Please parking brake, please.
Okay, parking brake is off, cleared to push.
So now we begin our pushback. We're gonna face east, 90 degrees.
Brakes off, here we go.
We push back and we start our engines. Turn off the packs. Let's give the engines maximum power to start up. Once we get started, we get our taxi clearance, head to the runway and take off. Because we're using AI HC, we're not on VATSIM. There are no controllers on VATSIM, so we're just going to go and do everything straight away. We're going taxi onto the runway and take off straight away. Like I said in the last video, that lovely scenery you see there is the actual scenery at JKIA. We're taking off from gate 5. So that's the FSDG scenery, which you can get from FSDG. I'll put the links on the description below.
Push is complete. Set parking brake, please.
Alright, brakes are set and pressure's normal.
Okay, sir. Tow bar is off. Pin is out. Watch the pin on the right.
Alright guys, thanks. You're cleared to disconnect. We will be watching for the pin and the release from guidance on the right side of the airplane, and we'll see you guys next time through.
Roger that. Have a good flight. ATUD1D.
Me too.
Now you can see we are flying our SID, our ATUD1D SID out of JKIA. So you can see the next waypoint is ATUD, where we have to be at or above 8,000 feet. But below 11,000 feet. So these are some of the things that you read in your departure charts or your SID departure charts, which I talk about in previous videos. So if you go to my previous videos, I elaborate on how to interpret those boundaries on the chart. Okay, so now we are approaching EGVOM, which is our initial approach fix for our star. We now have begun the standard arrival route. As you can see there, we are at Etutu. I don't know how to pronounce that. Etusu. So we are now following the fixes on our star as we are descending onto runway 21. I set the ILS frequency. I also configure the ILS just for redundancy, although we don't really need it, but I just put it just in case. So you can see we have our 2500 feet call out there. I activate the speed brakes because we're coming in a little bit too fast. You can see we've intercepted the localizer. It's come active with the glide slope. So I guess now we're just executing our star approach, and then once we get to our final approach fix, configure the plane for landing on final. So now I'm going to set the VRF speed. We're now hitting our final approach fix. For me, I usually like to take over control of the plane from here, so I'm going to turn off the autopilot as we cross our final approach fix. Then I'll configure the plane for landing, and then we shall land. So that's it. I don't know why, for some reason, the AI traffic does not respect airplanes there. So anyway, we've arrived in Mombasa at the parking stands. That concludes this week's video. So I hope you figured out how to use the PMDG FMC on how to do a SID and star procedure. If you like my content, please like and subscribe. I'll post the links of where you can get all these resources in the description below.